Shalom, shalom, Chevra. It's an honor and delight to be here with my teacher, Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, who is the chair of the Talmud department at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. He received smicha in 1986 from Rav Yechezkel Roth, Dayan of UTA Satmar. Rav Katz studied in Brisk and Yeshiva Beis Yosef, Navardik for over 10 years, a graduate of the Hashar program of Jewish educators. Rav Katz has taught at the Mayonot Yeshiva High School for girls and SAR High School, in addition to serving as a shul rabbi at the Prospect Heights Shul in Brooklyn, New York. He was a leading teacher of a Daf Yomi class in Borough Park for over 8 years. And on a personal note, Rav Ysoscher Katz has been a personal Rabbi to me, deeply formative educator in my yeshiva experience. And it's a delight to be here with you to talk.
Thank you very much for having me, Shmuly. For the opportunity.
Thank you so much. So to jump right in, does the Torah have anything uniquely positive to add to the broader discourse of LGBTQ rights?
Right. So it's an interesting question. My answer is twofold. In some ways, yes. In some ways, absolutely no. In the sense that, and I'll start with the no, actually, because I think one of the big mistakes in the Orthodox community, at least, is that we are dealing with people who are gay, and it matters because, my point of reference is Halacha. And that's how I kind of, go about the world and deciding how I relate to people, I interact with people. And in Halacha, there's a notion of a cheskas kashrus. People have a cheskas kashrus. So, I have jokingly say that I've never in my life met a gay person. What I mean, I've never in my life met a gay person who somehow his life somehow is in any way, shape, or matter incompatible with Halacha. The fact that a person identifies as LGBTQ or queer means nothing to me from that perspective. So, okay, that's how they identify. It shouldn't matter. They should be just like anybody else. They should be able to get an aliyah. They should be able to daven for the Yom. They should be able to be, an edut or so on and so forth. And as a matter of fact, that's the case was the case in my shul, which I just left a couple of months ago. There was my shul was in Brooklyn, as you know, and there is a large LGBTQ segment in Brooklyn, and there was a significant segment of LGBTQ people who identified as LGBTQ in my shul. And there was never ever an issue about whether they can be full participants in the fullest sense of the way. Whether the question was davening for the Yom and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, or davening, having aliyot, it didn't matter. It was kind of, in that way, I feel like the Torah says nothing because there is nothing. There's nothing to talk about. On the other hand, the reality is the reality, and there is a tragic reality that we live in a community, in a world that still is incredibly homophobic and incredibly, discriminatory. And the Torah is all about Torat Chaim v'Ahavat Chesed. The Torah is all about being here and making this world a better and kinder place. And that's what it's about. So the Torah is very much in that way a resource, a point of reference for how to go about helping make this world as inclusive and as welcoming and as loving as possible.
Very powerful. So what do you see as the biggest hurdles to LGBTQ acceptance within Orthodoxy? And do you think ultimately we'll be able to overcome those obstacles?
So again, I all I can do is refer back to my own experience, because just to clear the record, I left my shul in a rare case where I left for good reasons, because Rabbanis, when it works wonderfully, and I had a great experience in my shul. Really loved being a rabbi. Just kind of the little side issues that didn't work out, and I decided to pursue other things for the moment. I wrote about this a while ago, that it wasn't that long ago when someone said to you, I'm gay and Orthodox, and you would say, how very funny, why would you, there's no such a thing. And the truth is, there was no such a thing until not that long ago, because Orthodoxy had absolutely no room for people who identify as queer. And really am, thanking the Rabbi Shalom daily for the fact that is no longer the case. That one can come and say, I identify as gay and Orthodox, and say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's just a testament to the fact that there is a significant segment within the queer community who once upon a time was not willing to fight the fight that it takes to kind of create the space for the queer community who now are willing to kind of take up that battle. And there's also people who are willing to respond in kind. And again, coming back to what I said to you in the last question, my point of reference is halacha. That's where I meet the Rabbi Shalom. That's where I meet Kitchu Berichi. That's where I find spiritual sustenance. And what an incredible bracha that the gay community now is part of the halachic discourse. I mean, in my own experience, and as someone who's dealt with a significant number of LGBTQ related questions, they have shown the light on areas of halacha that we never have thought before, simply because these are not the kind of questions that we were thinking about. Now, the obvious area is that they have forced us to revisit first principles about sexuality and intimacy and relationships and all that. That's pashut. What's not so obvious to people, and what's not so exciting for me, is that even on, so to speak, second-tier halachot that are not directly related to the queer identity, all of a sudden have come to the fore through a new lens. I mean, the example that I love to share always, it's just so beautiful, is that I'm not there anymore, but I had a lesbian couple in my shul, really a beautiful, beautiful couple. You know, halavai that all of my shuls should have the Yirat Shamayim that they had. And are you ready for this? Before Pesach, they came to me and asked me what to do about kitniyot. One of them is Fardis, one of them is Ashkenazit, and they wanted to know what to do about kitniyot. Now, all of a sudden, it's not a question about intimacy and relationships, a question about kitniyot, but through a different angle I've never thought of before, they've never looked at. And I didn't have a chance to publish the tshuva, but I did end up writing up a tshuva, once again looking to first principles. What is the notion of minhag, and what happens when two people share a life? How do they determine minhag? And just briefly, I mean, I don't want to get into the conversation of hilchot minhag. It turns out that, you know, we all know that there's an idea that when there's a married couple, they usually should kind of go after one minhag, the husband's minhag. Because of my inquiry on this question about the lesbian couple, it turns out that that's actually not true. There is no halacha that a married couple has to follow the husband's minhag. All there is that when people live together, there needs to be a unified practice. Minhag achid is the language that the Tashbetz uses. And in traditional families, if you have to pick one person's practice, then of course you'll pick the practice of the husband, but it has nothing to do with gender at all. All it has to do with is two people shouldn't share a home where they each do different things. And so essentially what I told that couple is, you have two options to choose, so to speak. Pick whatever it is you want your home to be, and that's going to be what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Kitniyot, other issues. And it's just an opportunity to learn so much Torah that I really, call like queer Torah. I would have never have thought about it. I mean, quickly, just one other example is the Pidyon Ben question. There's a queer couple, a queer lesbian couple, and one of them is expecting a child. And when that child would be born, the question would then be, who does Pidyon Ben? Is it neither of them? Is it both of them? Is it based in? So the halachic discourse has grown tremendously. Our understanding of intimacy has grown tremendously. It's like I said, I'm going to come full circle to what I said in the beginning. Modeh ani lefanecha, that we are privileged to live in a tkufa where that no longer is a joke.
Yeah, it's awesome. For those of us out in the field, you've been an inspiring model of someone who really is taking these questions on head on, both with Yirat Shamayim and with deep rachamim, with deep love and compassion for people created b'Tselem Elokim. So to look at our most emerging frontier of gay marriage, what are some halachic vehicles that might enable and enhance same-sex marriage? Right.
So, I mean, again, my point of reference is Orthodox. I am identify as Orthodox. It's part of the way I go about in this world. And I'm bound by Halacha, and Halacha is really the final arbiter for me in terms of deciding what's allowed, what's not allowed. So to be honest, from an Orthodox halachic perspective, if we talk about, a same-sex marriage in the way marriage traditionally works within an Orthodox context, obviously that's between a husband and a wife. That's what the Torah describes, that's what the Torah proscribes, and that's all there is. So if the question is it possible for a same-sex couple to get married in the classic fashion of Kiddushin Kedas Moshe Yisrael? The answer is no, of course not. That's discussing a man and a woman. But if we ask another question, and I want to preface this by something quite fascinating, which is another Shmuly, not you, but I'm not a big fan of Shmuly B'Teach, to put it mildly. I don't think if there is anything that he's written or said that I can fully embrace or proudly identify with. But the one time he wrote something that I really, really, really connected to what he wrote was after the Supreme Court's decision about same-sex marriage. And when there was this huge conservative uproar in the general population and within the Jewish community, and he said, how beautiful is this? This is the only segment of American society that actually is clamoring to be married and to have the formality and the stability of what married life provides. And I think there's something so beautiful that queer Orthodox couples are coming to us to try to find ways for them to be married and to do what marriage does. Marriage does one thing. Marriage imparts kedusha on a relationship. Two people have decided to share the most intimate of their lives together, and the Torah has provided a mechanism that imposes sanctity. And sanctity is a double-edged sword. I mean, sanctity has a kum va'aseh and a sur mara. And I'm sorry, a sur mara and aseh tov. And that's what Kedusha is. Kedusha has limitations. This is a sacred relationship. There are boundaries. There are rules. And it's also, it is holy. There's a Shekhinah there. There's Kedusha there. And I think that we owe this to people within the queer Orthodox community who are coming to us for guidance on how to help make their relationship sacred, to do the best we can to try to find ways how to do it. Now, again, this is not going to involve in any way negating halacha. But I do believe it is possible to do without negating halacha. Obviously, this is not a shiur that I'm having with you. You're not having that kind of conversation, but I'm happy to have that conversation with anybody who is interested. But there are ways within the context of halacha where the couple is committed to live life according to halacha, where they are entitled to have the imprimatur of holiness on their lives. And the question is then going to be, what would such a ceremony look like? What would that entail? And what would that involve? I mean, for the moment, I don't think that I'm there. I don't think I'm at a place where I know what a same-sex relationship, sanctioned relationship would look like. But I definitely think it's something that's worth to explore and worth looking into. Again, I mean, coming back to what I said before, how inspired I am by members of the queer community who identify as Orthodox. A couple of summers ago, my wife and I were in Australia, and we were privileged to meet this wonderful, wonderful gay couple. We got to know them, two gay men who are married, living together and married, and we became very close friends, and they've really been a source of such inspiration to my wife and I, to our kids. We really got to know them very well. And unfortunately, just as is in the straight community, sometimes relationships fall apart. And sometimes relationships don't work out, and their relationship did not work out. And they came to me with help to figuring out how to kind of do a separation in a way that honors whatever it is that they've established. And it was, again, a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to think of what can the Torah and Halacha give us to help infuse their journey with the utmost sanctity, with the utmost significance. And I really don't see why that's not something that we should all pursue. It's not like the exclusion would make any difference in terms of the way people live their lives. People are who they are, and they are not going to change, nor are they coming to us for being changed. They're coming to us for a little help, a little support in holding their hands as they're going about this very difficult journey called life,
Right.
and we need to do it to them.
Yeah, there and as you said so beautifully, there's the pastoral commitment, just the human dimension, and the ethical dimension. There's creative ritual that can be created, and that, Baruch Hashem, we've inherited amazing halacha and rituals that can be employed. And like you said, there's also limits.
Perhaps. Again, like I said, I'm going to be very careful. I mean, I'm not at a place where I know what it looks like and what it's supposed to look like and what it means, but I'm definitely at a place where I'm willing to have that conversation because, again, Shmuly, this is amazing that there are people out there who are coming to us and say, help us create a commitment that is dedicated, that is responsible, and that is holy. So,
because on the secular front, there's an economic justice issue that those who are married have opportunities and rights that aren't. But on the religious level, I think that's exactly right. And I think we make a mistake, and I wonder if you agree, to define a marriage solely or primarily by sexual acts. It seems to me that sexual actions are indeed, intimacy is indeed an important part of a marriage, of a committed relationship, but it is not the defining factor. In most relationships, I would suspect less than 1% of the time together. The rest is co-managing a family and home building and the like. And I think so too. We should not allow it to be a barrier. Intimacy should not be a barrier towards home building. I wonder if you agree with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with the importance of exploring this question. Like I said before, the beauty about this time in our history of halacha is the fact that we are asking first principle questions. We are asking precisely the question that you're asking, which is when someone within a halachic context talks about marriage, what are the variables they're considering? What are the variables that they're talking about? And I want to just add one more point to what you said, which is the word intimacy is a very big word. It incorporates a lot of different kinds of intimacies, a lot of different kinds of closenesses. And, let's be honest. The Torah, at least from an Orthodox perspective, does talk about certain intimacies, but it only talks about those intimacies. It doesn't talk about other possibilities that definitely bear being looked at.
Right. Great. So looking at a sociological, psychological dimensions here, where is opposition to gay rights in Orthodoxy just fidelity to a traditional understanding of Torah? It's mamish, it's Yira Shamayim, it's being makabel, like our halachic responsibility. And when is it just homophobic? And sort of what are the boundaries there of those who are committed to halacha, and there should be respect, and those who simply have fear and hate that overflows and hurts people?
Right. So as you have alluded to in a word or two, but my background, I did grow up in the Haredi community, and I have a strong affinity to the Haredi community. I really had a great experience that I didn't leave because of anger or resentment, and I do feel that one of the mistakes that we in the liberal Orthodox community make is not sufficiently appreciating where their suspicions, where their fears come from. We might have done a lot of the work it takes to get to a place where we can reconcile or hold on to these kind of competing values of commitment to Torah and halacha, commitment to mitzvahs, and yet also be, a ally to the queer community. But I think we're making a mistake by not appreciating that was a process. I can't speak for anybody but myself. I didn't wake up one morning and say, sure, those two work together. They didn't. And thank God I had the books, the friends, and the support system that enabled me to get to a place to realize I can be as Orthodox as I always was, which I still am, and at the same time also be an ally to the queer community to create an Orthodoxy that is optimally welcome within the halachic framework for the queer community. But we need to approach this with a sensitivity. We need to talk to the people to our right who are not there with the respect and the dignity that they deserve, because we never know. I mean, are there elements of homophobia in that mix? Yes, of course, there are elements of homophobia in that mix, but it's not just that. And instead of, the Shammai mode of clobbering them with, this is immoral, this is unethical, I think the Hillel mode would resonate much more deeper with a lot of people. So that's one thing I'm going to say. The other thing that I feel is missing in our discourse about LGBTQ is that I believe that there are two types of homophobia. There is blatant homophobia and there is latent homophobia. And blatant homophobia, we know, we've encountered that, and that's outrageous, and that needs to be, shut down the minute we encounter that. But there's also a latent homophobia, which is one that is homophobic still, but doesn't come from a malicious place. It comes from a place of, suspicion, of it's different, it's not what you're used to. I mean, I'll use a poor analogy, but an analogy nevertheless. Years ago, when there was a debate about women wearing tefillin, my resistance to the instinctual, emotional was much stronger than to the halachic. I'm a man who is used to very, manly and masculine images. It took me a while to get used to the fact that it's not a steer to kind of the way I imagine the world to be, to see a woman wearing tefillin. And I think there's an element of that going on within the Orthodox discourse where it just feels strange. It feels different than what we're used to in terms of seeing the role of genders play in the way people interact. And once again, I'm going to come back to what I said before. There might need to be an element of small docha, but in my own experience, I found that Yamin Makarevet goes much further and it accomplishes much more than a small docha approach.
Fascinating. Okay, so my last question for you today. Of course, there's so much more to say, but we can't do it all today.
Of course.
If we zoom out, what's at stake in all this?
What's at stake in all this? I'm generally not a radical person, but I'll be a little bit radical. I think what's at stake in this is the future of modern Orthodox observance, because the reality is that for a lot of people in the younger generation, the question about queer acceptance is not just a question about queer acceptance. It's a question about a larger attitude towards Torah, Yiddishkeit, and modernity. I repeatedly encounter young people for whom the test case of whether the Torah resonates with their own innate value system is halacha's attitude towards a queer community. So the queer question no longer is a queer question. I like to share with people an instance of a friend of mine. A friend of mine was invited to speak in a very prominent modern Orthodox school. I'm sure if you took 10 seconds, you will say, oh, that one it must be, but I'm not going to share the name. And he was invited to speak at that school, it's a high school, about the LGBTQ issue. He gets up and he says to the kids, before I start, I want to ask you, if a friend of yours invites you to their gay wedding, how many of you participated in the wedding? You want to take a guess how many hands went up, Reb Shmuly?
I would guess Rove.
Wrong. 100%. But that's not the Chiddush my friend said. The Chiddush was, it didn't take them a second to think, let me think. It was instinctual. It was obvious to them. If their friend, if their relative gets married, doesn't matter. So it's a heterosexual marriage or it's a homosexual marriage, they're going to go.
Right.
And that has tremendous implications of where they are religiously. And if we are not going to step in, and again, not compromise halacha, not give up on halacha, but as moderns, we always know that halacha bears revisiting. Take a look again. See, is there room within the confines of observance to make Orthodoxy more welcoming and more accepting? And like I said, if we don't do that, the consequences, I'm afraid, is going to be quite significant.
I think that's stated very well. And in addition to the non-queer population, I would say, and I know you'll agree from your powerful Facebook posts, which you've shed tears over this, the number of ex-Haredi folks who have committed suicide, the number of LGBTQ Orthodox folks who have committed suicide. We know that at least at the lowest bar, although it's in another sense the highest bar, pikuach nefesh, the power of just all the data shows the power of one mentor or rabbi to embrace or push away someone on the most basic level is a life or death issue.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I will say that given my own background and my own experience, having grown up in the Haredi community and still having relationships with the community, it. I was quite. I mean, as you mentioned, I've written on Facebook on this issue. This is an issue that deeply matters to me and is deeply important to me. And there have been quite a few people within the community who reached out and said to me exactly what I've been saying throughout this interview. I don't even want help in stopping to be Orthodox. I just want to know that I can be who I am and still continue to be Orthodox. And interestingly enough, quite often they not only said they want to be Orthodox, they said, is it possible to be queer and Haredi? And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. Rabbi Ysoscher Katz, thank you so much for taking this time. Friends, continue to follow his Facebook page. He puts on really insightful Torah and his other writings out there. Yasher koach.
Thank you very much for having me, Shmuly. Culture of keep up your holy work. You're doing avodas hakodesh.
Amen. Amen.